Hello and welcome to Eye on the Money, the television show that gives you insights into how to improve your financial well-being as well as make your money work for you. I'm Ingrid Nantege. Now, according to the 2018 Kenya Financial Stability Report, despite a robust GDP growth in 2018 and 83% access to formal financial services by Kenyans, the proportion of households who felt that their financial health status worsened in 2018 increased to 51% from 34.3% in the 2015 survey. The deterioration in financial health undermines the ability of individuals to meet their financial obligation, with spillovers into financial institutions. Deterioration of the financial health of households also contributed to default. The report also shows that most of the households used bank loans to buy vehicles and land or houses, while SACCO loans were mainly used to undertake long-term investments such as buying land or houses and investing in education by paying school fees. Mobile banking loans mainly used to meet short-term household needs and emergencies and were important in ameliorating liquidity problems and meeting unexpected expenditures of households. Joining me in studio today is financial coach and senior consultant at Money Clinic, Amos Ngahu, to help us make sense of this report. You're welcome to the show, Amos.
Thank you.
You already know it's always a pleasure.
Pleasure
I feel like you've been on this show more than anyone. You always offer so much valuable insights.
Thank you.
Amos, did you pay attention to that report that I just read?
Yeah.
So now the report is telling us that as of 2018, the last most recent study that was done, Kenya's Financial Stability Report, we're seeing more individuals from households complain of unhealthy, financial status, even against the fact that there's been more access to credit. People have been taking out so much more in terms of loans, but it's not in tandem to how healthy they are in households. What do you take, or rather, what do you make of the key findings from this report?
First of all, thank you for having me again.
Always.
And the challenge is coming in when we find as families being unable to meet financial obligations, where now we have turned to borrowing. And since the lending rates were capped, you realize that people have gone to the more of the digital lending apps to take loans, and it's not sustainable. So that's why you'll find people now borrowing more. In fact, they're borrowing from other apps to pay other apps. So it doesn't really augur well with the financial health of the families. And again, it's in 2016 you realize that we had less and fewer lending apps. Today you open your phone, they're already advertising on it. So there are so many things that you can look at, but the big challenge is that we're actually living beyond our means. Yes.
So Amos, even when we talk about poor financial health, like you've said, we have a lot more access to unconventional ways of accessing money, which maybe didn't exist some years back. But would you say the biggest problem is really just borrowing, taking out loans? What would you say are the key drivers when it comes to poor financial health? Is it because we're seeing so many more people now going out there, taking loans? What is the biggest problem right now?
For me, I feel like borrowing is actually a sign of something bigger. It's just the tip of the iceberg, because we have to go back and ask ourselves what influences our decisions when it comes to money. Is it peer pressure? Is it your family background, like the things you've seen? Because either way, whether you borrow or not, because of inflation, even the services, if you're in business, the services that you offer, you will definitely take your prices up. So money will come. The other day I got in touch with a guy I met him a few years ago. He actually sharpens knives. You know those guys
who the one with the bikes,
yes,
and
they
stop
look
at
like
every
bikes.
apartment block?
Exactly.
Right.
A few years ago, this guy used to charge 5 shillings. Today he's charging a whooping 30 shillings. That's an improvement of what? It's like 200-300%. But now when you look at this guy, there's no change in his lifestyle. He wears the same thing. You cannot tell any difference, and yet the clients are the same. The question is it that this guy does not have money, Is it that he's not making money? Or is it because that he has not adjusted his lifestyle to see, this is the money I make, what difference can I make in my life? And that's why even today when I talk of illiteracy, it's not about the ability to not to access information. It's the ability to learn, unlearn, and relearn. So if you have been doing something and you see things are changing, you have to unlearn what you know. You have to unlearn the way you've been handling money, even in families. I was earlier in our discussion, we were talking about this guy who had a kiosk somewhere in these suburbs. And this guy was there for 19 years.
Doing the same
thing. Same kiosk.
Whether it worked or not, he was doing
he was there, you know. But what actually helped him was the construction of a bypass that actually had all those structures demolished. Probably that's the time he got an opportunity to think, you know, what else can I be able to do? Because you cannot stay in the same level. You know, times are changing. So you have to look at what is affecting the decisions that you're making. And there are so many things that affect us. Could be peer pressure, could be the way you were brought up. Because for instance, if that guy had a shop for 19 years, you can imagine the kid who is now probably, who was born and were living there, so he's 19. So if you tell him to think outside the business of a kiosk, that's a whole rocket science lesson, you know. So we have to unlearn and relearn.
But then, Amos, with those examples that you've given, especially with the knife sharpener, who you said maybe some years back he was charging 5 bob, now it has changed to 30 bob, but there's not much that you can see, there's not much that has changed.
Yes.
Then I'm tempted to ask, do you then think it also boils down to priorities? And by this I mean, do you feel that maybe as a nation, maybe as a people, we don't really have value for money? Maybe we don't have the discipline that comes with it. What would be your take in terms of value and prioritization when it comes to the income and the money that we make or that we have?
Well, I think it's priorities, because in terms of making money, I think Kenyans are very creative. I sit down with people and sometimes people feel like I can give them solutions, but by the time I am recommending something, they already have the ideas. So it's a matter of investing in the right places. Remember, this is one thing I've come to understand, that whether you have, let's say we earn the same income. Let's say our income, let's say is 50,000, and we are both, let's say all other expenses held constant.
Right.
If today Ingrid, being the better person, decides to save 20,000 on her, let's say, a saving society, and I choose not to, and I squander everything I earn, chances are by 15th we will be both broke.
Wow.
But you're broke in a nice way because you've channeled your money elsewhere.
Right.
But for me, I have spent everything. So we are both waiting for end month. That's what I've come to understand. So it's up to us to prioritize and say, these are the most important things. Because remember, we feel like we have a lot of, if for instance, I'm talking to someone who's around 25 on their first job, they feel like they have their entire life working. But remember, that time just goes like that. So it's up to us to say, as I start, I'll prioritize on doing that sacrifice early in my career so that I can enjoy the rest of it. Or I enjoy all of it, then I regret later. So there has to be priorities. Yes.
Amos, the report also made reference to the fact that a lot of individuals from households who actually took out loans channeled, well, the ones that took out from financial institutions channeled them towards buying cars, to, you know, and the like. Then the others who took out from SACCOs, they channeled them towards education, school fees. My question is, when you're taking out a loan, what should ideally be behind that? Should I take out a loan to go buy a pair of shoes?
Yes.
How does the, you know, when you go out to take out a facility, how does it feed into eventually going down that road where I say, oh my God, my household, we're so poorly, we're doing so poorly financially.
Yes.
Is there a correlation? Oh, it's fine. If you take out the loan and it serves the purpose, then well and good.
Well, I know an elder friend of mine told me one thing, that taking consumer debt is like adding more light for a blind man to see.
Pointless.
There's no point, because either way you're actually consuming money that you don't have. And this time, that's why I'll go back to even to lending institutions.
Right.
Why why don't we do an analysis? Just because I'm on social media, you have already sent your app to analyze me and to see that I can afford a loan of 10,000. But you see, the moment as an institution you lend someone money and they are unable to pay it, that's the worst disservice you can do to them. And that's why now it goes back to us asking ourselves, if I am taking a loan right now, because like you mentioned, there are people who are taking loans from SACCOs to get education. But you know, they're actually using that in the wrong context. Because I know the other day I held a talk with a certain group of parents, and one of them happened to work in a SACCO. And she was sharing a driver in that institution whose income was around 70,000 because they've worked there for long, had saved up to 7 million shillings. So all they were doing was getting the dividend they get at the end of the year. He was using that to pay school fees, and his capital still remains.
Right.
Comparing to that, and then still in the same circle, someone else, they were saying in their department, there's always a queue when kids are going back to school for people to take emergency loans.
Wow.
Same institution.
Wow.
So, and those are two different people.
It's a trap.
You know, so it is the work of this circle to say, we need to take all these people who are taking emergency loans, we need to put them in a class.
Right.
We need to put a reality check in their lives. You know, we'd rather lose them as clients, but we've put something in their mind. So it is the work of a lender to invest in this person. Because let me tell you something, if today I'm taking a loan and I'm repaying 20,000 on it, chances are I have capacity to save that 20,000 in the same circle.
Right.
You understand? So it is something that we need to just make the right use of. Because these lending institutions, they can be good and they can actually be very brutal. So it is up to them now to say that we owe this to our clients and train them and invest a lot in them. Because at the end of the day, there's nothing as, because most people, let's agree on this one, very few people can access financial literacy information.
Yes,
it's not out there.
That's a fact.
You know? But can you imagine, even as a SACCO, you could be the only person that this person looks up to. You could be the only institution that they feel will give me sound advice. And that's why all banks, if you're opening an account, advise this young person, advise this person who started working, because at the end of the day, they will appreciate, because you're actually saving a life. You've seen people killing each other because of wealth. Why? Because these are just signs of the bigger picture, of the signs of the bigger ailment that is affecting people down there. Yeah.
Amos, let me give you an even more interesting finding that the report came up with. Now, we're talking about SACCOs, we're talking about financial institutions.
Yes.
The report also found that there are more people turning to informal nature of taking out loans. For example, from the shopkeeper. And according to the report, this constituted the largest proportion of credit, followed by loans from family, followed by loans from friends, and followed by loans from mobile banks.
Yes.
What's your take on this? What's driving this? Like the highest proportion, Amos.
Yes.
And someone says, oh, my household, we're very financially poor, but the biggest loan, your biggest loan, is not from a SACCO.
Yes.
It's not from a financial.
Yes.
So, Amos, what kind of loan are you taking from the shopkeeper? Just help us understand this.
But this is actually, and you know, this is undocumented. Because if you go to every kiosk, you'll find that there are people who are regulars, that they will even send their family members. Just give me the bill at the end of the month. You know, the other day I was looking at the most expensive lenders, and you saw it is actually out there in the domain. But actually the biggest one was, the most expensive one was Okwa Steamer with KPLC. It's actually, I'm not accusing them of anything, but it's out there. So you realize some of these, if they were now to document
It's
that, yeah, if you were to document that, you realize most of these debts are consumer debts. You understand? And that is where the problem is. We're actually borrowing. Because let me ask you something. If today you walk into your house and you don't have money and you've run out of tokens,
I mean, I'm going to take out that Okwa.
You will take it.
100%.
Yeah, but when you think, and last time we were here, I was telling you, before you take a loan, I mean, go lock yourself in that washroom.
Right.
And ask yourself some few questions. You know, if I don't have electricity and I get to my house, can I do a candlelit dinner and just do my own notes?
Right.
You know, it gives you an opportunity to think, because the moment you have your TV running, you have everything running, you won't even think.
Right.
So sometimes it's always good to take time and think about it. And that's why I'm going back to what influences the decisions when it comes to finances. What is influencing you?
And I'm glad you asked that. Let me interject just for one split second.
Mm-hmm.
You mentioned that some of the biggest debt that's out there
Yes.
is consumer debt.
Yes.
But someone would also argue, like, some of these things I have to survive. Like, my needs outweigh my income. So there'll come a day when I've run out of my salary for the month. And like you said, my steamer is beeping. You know, I've run out of gas. What then is the middle ground?
No, the thing is, it has happened. But you see, it's a decision. And you see, a decision, no one can force you. I cannot force you to make a decision, because it goes back to planning, you know?
Right.
And it is with very simple things. If, for instance, I have been running, let's say, an instant shower in the morning, even when it's sunny, even when it's, can I time it? Can I know when I don't have enough shopping, I can switch off the refrigerators?
Right.
Can I actually ask my house help to be ironing over the weekends only? You know, because every time you switch on an ironing board, you know, small things that can save on your expenses. Trust you me, these are the small coins. You save 10 bob today. There was a time I was doing a photocopy with an elderly lady. And I did a photocopy, and the balance was 8 shillings. So I told the lady, just keep it. She told me, no, pick those coins. So I picked the 8 shillings. She told me, go give you have children? I told her, yes. Go give your son, even if it's the 8 shillings, show them that they can put it in a piggy bank.
She took you to school.
Exactly.
You should have known better.
You know, and sometimes that 8 shillings could mean, if you convert it into tokens of electricity, it could run you even for 10 minutes, right?
Right.
So those are the small things that if we are keen, that change you leave behind, that unnecessary spending, if you're spending a lot of money on airtime, are there bundles, are there packages that come from the provider that you can actually spend less, you know? In real sense, I have been able to reduce my mobile, my calling charges by up to 50%.
Wow.
Out of taking a certain bundle, you know?
Yeah.
So it has to be intentional. And that's why when now you look at the bigger picture, yes, you may struggle now, but like I said, are you going to continue borrowing? Is it sustainable?
Unfortunately, Amos, I feel like we just sat down. My director's in my believe it or not, we've come to the end of the show. Thank you very much for providing valuable tips and insights.
Yes.
Personally, I know I've learned a lot, and I feel like I'm just not going to be part of this statistic where people complain about, you know, being poorly financially healthy in the household, and yet my kiosk person out there has a black book with my name in it.
Yes.
Thank you very much for coming on to the show. For sure, we're going to have you back. You're a valuable resource. We've come to the end of the show, but as usual, I'm going to leave you with a financial tip. Spend less than you earn and stick to a budget. No matter how much or little you're paid, you may find it difficult to get ahead if you spend more than you earn. Prudent cuts to your spending can result in big savings. A budget will also show where your money is going. Depending on when you're paid, you may decide on a weekly, fortnightly, or monthly budget. You need a budget regardless of how much you earn a year. And that's why we wrap it up today on Eye on the Money, but you can keep the conversation going on our social media pages at Metropole TV KE on Facebook, Instagram, and Twitter. I'm Ingrid Nantege. There's more programming coming your way, so don't go anywhere.